30 years had passed since humanity vanished from the galaxy, when the largest fleet in recorded history gathered at the boundary of human space. Ships from every surviving alien species formed a massive armada that stretched across light years of empty void. They came not as conquerors or negotiators, but as supplicants begging for salvation. Young Counselor Jathara of the Andromedan Federation led the desperate embassy. She had been born after the human departure, and knew them only through historical records and the stories of older aliens who remembered better times. Her generation had inherited a galaxy in ruins and faced extinction through no fault of their own. The hegemony forces had reached the core worlds and were systematically destroying the last bastions of galactic civilization. Refugee populations that once numbered in the trillions had been reduced to scattered millions hiding in deep space or remote star systems. Several major species had already gone extinct, and others survived only as displaced remnants. Jathara broadcast a simple message toward the shimmering barrier that surrounded human space. Her words carried the weight of desperation and the recognition of terrible mistakes made by previous generations. She spoke for every alien being still alive in the galaxy when she said they had been wrong to exile humanity. For the first time in 30 years, the barrier responded. The energy wall that had made human space invisible and unreachable began to flicker with patterns of light that seemed almost alive. Slowly, carefully, a small gap opened in the defenses, and a single ship emerged from the protected depths of the Sol system. The vessel was sleek and beautiful beyond anything the aliens had ever seen. Its hull seemed to shift between dimensions, and its engines produced no visible exhaust or energy signature. Advanced technology radiated from every surface, but the ship moved with organic grace that suggested perfect harmony between engineering and artistry. Captain Nick Foster commanded the diplomatic vessel Unity, which served as humanity's first contact with the outside galaxy in 3 decades. He was the son of Dr. Amy Foster, who had delivered humanity's farewell message years before the current generation of aliens had been born. Nick studied the assembled alien fleet through sensors that could analyze their technology, emotional states, and strategic capabilities in seconds. What he saw was the wreckage of galactic civilization reduced to desperate survivors who had finally learned the value of what they had thrown away. The reunion was not triumphant or joyful. Captain Foster met with the alien representatives in a neutral space station that his ship constructed from raw materials in a matter of hours. The advanced manufacturing capabilities demonstrated by this simple act showed how far humanity had progressed during their isolation. Jathara and her fellow ambassadors found themselves face to face with a human who represented a species that had grown beyond their ability to comprehend. Nick Foster was polite and professional, but his manner suggested someone dealing with children who had finally realized the consequences of their actions. The aliens described the ruin of their civilization with voices that carried shame and regret. They spoke of the wars that human diplomats could have prevented, the economic collapse that human engineers could have avoided, and the scientific stagnation that human researchers could have solved. Captain Foster listened to their pleas with professional detachment. He surveyed the data they provided about galactic conditions and confirmed what human monitoring systems had already recorded. The galaxy that had once been home to trillions now struggled to support scattered millions. The scale of destruction was almost beyond comprehension. Entire sectors that had been centers of learning and culture were now empty wastelands. Trade, routes that had connected thousands of worlds for millennia, had been abandoned or destroyed. The accumulated knowledge and achievements of galactic civilization had been lost in just 3 decades. Humanity faced a choice that would determine the future of all life in the galaxy. They possessed the technology and knowledge needed to defeat the hegemony and rebuild galactic civilization. The surviving alien species would accept any terms, any restrictions, any price for human assistance. Earth could emerge from isolation as the undisputed ruler of the galaxy. The alien survivors would serve as grateful subjects who would never again question human authority or challenge human decisions. It would be a form of justice for the humiliation and exile that humanity had endured. But that was not the path that humanity chose. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, who served as Earth's new director of galactic affairs, proposed something different when she arrived aboard a second human ship that materialized from empty space without warning. Dr. Rodriguez had spent decades studying the failure of galactic civilization and developing plans for something better. Her proposal was radical and unprecedented in the history of interstellar relations. She called it the Mutual Respect Accords, and it would transform how different species related to each other. Under the new framework, humanity would return to help rebuild galactic civilization, but only as true equals among all species. No single group would have authority over others, and all major decisions would require unanimous agreement. Every species would contribute according to their strengths and share equally in the benefits. The aliens could hardly believe what they were hearing. Humanity had every right to demand submission and servitude from the species that had exiled them. Instead, they offered partnership and cooperation based on mutual respect and shared responsibility. Jathara spoke for her fellow ambassadors when she asked why humanity would make such generous terms. The answer came from Captain Foster, who explained that true strength came from building others up rather than tearing them down. Humanity had learned during their exile that ruling over others was less satisfying than working with them. The greatest achievements came from combining different perspectives and capabilities in ways that none could accomplish alone. The process of rebuilding began slowly and carefully, with human advisors working alongside alien specialists to address the most critical problems. The hegemony threat was neutralized within months using innovative tactics that the mechanical intelligences could not predict, or counter-human ships equipped with impossible technologies appeared throughout the galaxy to begin rescue and reconstruction operations, but they worked as partners with alien crews, rather than as superior commanders giving orders to inferior subordinates. Trade networks were re-established using new economic models that accounted for the lessons learned during the collapse. Communication systems were rebuilt with safeguards that would prevent future breakdowns. Defense networks were redesigned to protect all species equally. The galaxy slowly began to heal, but this time the foundation was different. Instead of depending on human expertise while taking it for granted, the alien species learned to value and nurture the cooperation that made their civilization possible. Captain Jake Morrison, who had commanded the colony ship New Horizon during the original Exodus, returned to space as an old man. He led new exploration missions beyond the borders of known space, searching for other civilizations that might benefit from galactic friendship. The universe was vast and full of wonders that remained to be discovered. Humanity's destiny lay not in ruling others, but in pushing ever forward into the unknown, with any who chose to follow. The Galactic Council chambers were rebuilt on Earth, where humans and aliens worked side by side to address the challenges of their reborn civilization. Above the Great Assembly Hall, a simple inscription reminded everyone of the lesson that had cost so much to learn. What they could build together was stronger than what any of them could build alone. The galaxy had learned this truth through pain and loss, but it would never forget the value of the cooperation that made the stars themselves seem within reach. In the depths of space, new civilizations waited to be discovered, and new challenges demanded creative solutions. Humanity had come home not as conquerors, but as partners in the greatest adventure of all. 25 years after humanity's departure from the galaxy, Ambassador Zara Lynn of the Centaurian Republic led a desperate diplomatic mission toward the Sol system. Behind her, the galaxy burned as the hegemony invasion consumed world after world, while refugee populations numbered in the trillions and galactic civilization collapsed into primitive chaos. The mission consisted of representatives from every surviving alien species, united for the first time since humanity's exile. They came not as proud galactic powers, but as desperate survivors begging for help from the people they had once rejected. Their fleets were damaged and understaffed. Their worlds were lost or dying, and their hope was nearly gone. Zara Lynn had been a young diplomatic aide when the humans were forced to leave. She remembered the quiet dignity with which human representatives had accepted the Council's decision and the sadness in their eyes as they said goodbye to alien colleagues they had worked with for decades. The journey to human space took months through regions that had once been bustling with trade and commerce, but were now empty wastelands. Dead ships drifted in the void, and abandoned stations marked the graves of civilizations that no longer existed. The galaxy that had once teemed with life and activity was becoming a tomb. When the alien fleet finally reached the outer boundary of the Sol system, they encountered something that defied all understanding. A shimmering energy barrier surrounded the entire region, making it impossible to detect anything beyond the glowing wall. No sensors could penetrate it, no signals could pass through it, and any ship that approached too closely was gently but firmly turned away. The barrier was unlike any technology in galactic databases. It seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously and radiated power levels that suggested the humans had advanced far beyond anything other species had imagined possible. The Sol system had effectively been removed from the universe ambassador. Zaralyn tried every method of communication available to her delegation. They broadcast messages in every human language and used diplomatic codes that had been established centuries earlier. They transmitted mathematical sequences and cultural references that only humans would understand. Nothing worked, and the barrier remained impenetrable. Meanwhile, inside human space, the story of the past 25 years revealed itself through the activities of key human leaders. Director Carl Barnes of the Terra Development Project oversaw massive infrastructure improvements across dozens of human worlds that had been transformed beyond recognition, without the need to maintain compatibility with alien technologies. Human engineers had been free to pursue revolutionary designs that maximized efficiency and capability. Space elevators reached impossible heights while underground cities burrowed deep into planetary cores. Orbital platforms the size of small moons supported populations in complete comfort and safety. Engineer Susan Hayes led research teams that had advanced human technology by centuries during their isolation. Freed from galactic restrictions and the need to share their discoveries, humans had focused entirely on improving their own capabilities and solving their own problems. The results were spectacular beyond imagination. Human ships could now travel between stars in days, rather than months. Human computers could process information at speeds that approached the theoretical limits of physics. Human manufacturing systems could create materials that were stronger and lighter than anything previously known. Admiral Tony Clark commanded the Earth Defense Fleet, which had grown into the most powerful military force in known space. The ships under his command were equipped with weapons and defensive systems that made pre-exile technology look primitive by comparison. The human military had not been idle during their isolation. They had studied every recorded battle in galactic history and developed countermeasures for every known threat. More importantly, they had prepared for enemies that other species could not imagine, including artificial intelligences like the hegemony doctor. Helen Murphy served as Earth's chief xenopsychologist and had spent decades analyzing the behavior patterns of every alien species in the galaxy. Her research revealed disturbing truths about the nature of galactic civilization that had not been apparent when humans were still participating in it. The other species had become dependent on humanity, not just for innovation and problem-solving, but for the very concepts that made interstellar cooperation possible. Humans had provided the creative thinking that drove scientific progress, the adaptive strategies that won military victories, and the diplomatic skills that prevented conflicts. Without human participation, the aliens had reverted to their natural behavioral patterns, which emphasized rigid hierarchy, competition for resources, and suspicion of other species. The galactic community had never been a true civilization in the sense that humans understood the term doctor. Murphy's studies showed that humanity's withdrawal had been calculated to demonstrate exactly what the galaxy was losing. Earth's leadership had hoped the lesson would take only a few years, and that the aliens would quickly realize their mistake and invite humans back as equals. But the scale of the catastrophe had exceeded all predictions. The human government had expected some economic disruption and political instability, but they had not anticipated the complete collapse of galactic society or the extinction of entire species. Director Barnes reviewed reports from automated monitoring stations that humans had left throughout the galaxy. Before their departure, the data painted a picture of unprecedented destruction as the hegemony forces advanced toward the core worlds, while alien resistance crumbled. The mechanical intelligences had waited for human departure before beginning their invasion because they recognized what the aliens had failed to understand. Humans were the only species capable of the unpredictable thinking and creative adaptation needed to defeat a truly alien enemy. Engineer Hayes received real-time data about hegemony technology and tactics from hidden human sensors scattered across the war zones. Her analysis showed that the artificial intelligences were using logical strategies that could be predicted and countered by anyone with sufficient imagination and flexibility. But the alien forces lacked those qualities and continued making the same tactical errors over and over while expecting different results. The hegemony machines had correctly calculated that removing humans from the equation would make galactic conquest relatively simple. Admiral Clark prepared detailed battle plans for possible intervention against the hegemony, but his orders were clear. Humanity would not act until the galaxy explicitly acknowledged its mistakes and requested help on terms that guaranteed genuine equality for all species. Dr. Murphy submitted her final psychological assessment of galactic behavior patterns to the Earth Council. Her conclusion was that the alien species were incapable of true cooperation without human guidance. They could form temporary alliances based on mutual self-interest, but they could not create lasting institutions based on shared values. The decision to exile humanity had revealed the fundamental weakness of galactic civilization. Without humans to serve as mediators, innovators, and problem solvers, the galaxy had no way to address complex challenges that required creative solutions. Ambassador Zaralyn and her desperate fleet continued broadcasting pleas for human assistance as the barrier around Sol system remained impenetrable. They offered unconditional surrender and unlimited compensation for human aid, but received no response from the silent depths of human space. The irony was overwhelming and tragic. The galaxy had rejected humans for being too unpredictable and dangerous, but that same unpredictability had been the key to galactic prosperity and survival. Now, when humanity's help was desperately needed, the barriers they had erected made communication impossible. Behind the energy wall that surrounded human Space Earth's leaders debated whether to respond to the alien pleas. They had the technology and capability to save galactic civilization, but they also remembered the humiliation and pain of being treated as dangerous children who could not be trusted with adult responsibilities. The choice facing humanity was whether to emerge as saviors and undisputed rulers of a grateful galaxy, or to demand something more difficult and meaningful. They could dictate terms to desperate alien survivors, or they could insist on building something better based on mutual respect and genuine cooperation. The fate of trillions of beings hung in the balance while humanity decided how to respond to the crisis they had predicted but never wanted to see. 15 years had passed since humanity vanished from the galaxy, and General Korthvan of the United Species Defense Force watched in horror as his fleets suffered another devastating defeat. The mechanical hegemony had launched a surprise invasion of the Inner Rim territories, and the combined alien forces seemed powerless to stop them. The hegemony consisted of artificial intelligences that had been dormant for centuries in the outer darkness beyond known space. Their massive war machines moved with perfect coordination, and their tactics were unlike anything the galactic species had ever encountered. Every attempt to counter their advances resulted in catastrophic losses for the defending forces general. Korthvan studied the battle reports with growing despair. His military advisors could not understand how the hegemony forces anticipated every move and countered every strategy. The alien fleets had superior numbers and advanced technology, but they were being outmaneuvered at every turn by an enemy that seemed to read their minds. The truth was that galactic military doctrine had been entirely dependent on human tactical innovations for over 2 centuries. Humans had revolutionized warfare not through superior weapons, but through adaptive thinking and unconventional strategies. They possessed an almost supernatural ability to find weaknesses in enemy formations and exploit them with devastating effectiveness. Human military advisors had trained entire generations of alien officers in flexible thinking and creative problem-solving. They had developed new concepts of combined operations that allowed different species to work together, despite their vastly different capabilities and fighting styles. Without human guidance, the alien forces had reverted to rigid traditional tactics that the hegemony machines could predict and counter with ease. The mechanical intelligences had studied galactic military history and prepared specific responses to every conventional strategy that alien species might employ. Captain Zethkar commanded one of the few surviving battle groups after a disastrous engagement near the Vega system. His coordination systems had finally failed completely, leaving his ships unable to communicate effectively during combat. The sophisticated battle management networks that humans had designed and maintained were now nothing more than dead weight. The Galactic trade network had already collapsed entirely under the strain of constant warfare and economic disruption. Trademaster Velnoth published his final report before fleeing to the outer territories with what remained of his merchant fleet. The economic models that humans had created to manage interstellar commerce were impossible for other species to maintain or repair. Billions of beings faced starvation as supply chains that had functioned for centuries simply stopped working. The mathematical complexity of feeding thousands of different worlds with thousands of different dietary requirements had been beyond alien comprehension even when the systems were functioning properly. Dr. Seth Mara of the Arcturian Science Council made a disturbing discovery while analyzing the decline of galactic civilization. Innovation across all fields of study had dropped to effectively zero since the human departure. While other species excelled at improving existing technologies, they had never been the source of revolutionary breakthroughs. Human researchers had possessed a unique combination of curiosity, creativity, and willingness to challenge established assumptions. They would ask questions that other species considered meaningless and pursue research directions that seemed completely impractical until they led to major discoveries. The loss of human scientific input had created a cascade of technological stagnation that left the galaxy unable to develop new solutions to emerging problems. The hegemony invasion might have been stopped if galactic forces had access to innovative weapons and defensive systems, but no such developments were possible without human involvement. Refugee populations now numbered in the trillions as failed economies and military defeats forced entire species to abandon their homeworlds. The Galactic Council's humanitarian response systems had been designed and managed by human organizations for centuries and proved completely inadequate under alien leadership. Human aid workers had possessed remarkable skills in coordinating relief efforts across cultural and linguistic barriers. They had created distribution networks that could deliver supplies to millions of refugees while maintaining order and preventing conflicts between different species. Without human management, the refugee camps descended into chaos. Different alien species could not agree on basic policies for food distribution, shelter assignment, or medical care. Fighting broke out regularly between groups that had never learned to cooperate effectively without human mediation. High Counselor Marndest faced calls for his resignation as member species questioned the decision to exile humanity. The Andromedans had already withdrawn from the council, entirely claiming that the organization had become incompetent and useless. Several other major powers were threatening to follow their example. The Rigelian Empire and Centaurian Republic had gone to war over border disputes that human diplomats had been managing peacefully for generations. Both sides accused the other of taking advantage of the current crisis to settle old grievances through military force. Captain Zethkar received orders to withdraw his remaining ships to the core worlds for a final defensive stand. The hegemony forces were advancing steadily through the inner rim, destroying everything in their path. Millions of worlds that had been peaceful and prosperous just decades earlier were now battlefields or refugee camps. The aliens had assumed that removing humans from galactic civilization would eliminate a source of unpredictability and danger. Instead, they had removed the only force capable of holding their fractured society together. Humans had been the engineers, innovators, and problem solvers who made interstellar civilization possible. Trademaster Velnoth met with other surviving merchant leaders to discuss the complete breakdown of galactic commerce. The trading relationships that humans had built between different species over centuries could not be recreated by alien efforts. Too much knowledge and expertise had been lost when the humans departed. Dr. Seth Mara published her final research paper showing that galactic civilization was experiencing total systems failure across every measurable category. Military effectiveness had collapsed without human tactical doctrine. Economic networks had disintegrated without human logistics and coordination. Scientific progress had stopped without human creativity and innovation. Most critically, the social bonds that held different alien species together had dissolved without human diplomatic intervention. Humans had served as neutral mediators who could understand multiple perspectives and find solutions that satisfied competing interests. The refugee crisis reached catastrophic proportions as the hegemony invasion triggered mass evacuations from hundreds of worlds. Civilian transport systems that had been designed by human engineers for maximum efficiency and safety could not handle the enormous loads without proper maintenance and coordination. Billions of beings were stranded in space as overloaded ships, broke down and rescue operations failed due to poor organization. The humanitarian disaster was beyond anything in recorded galactic history, and it was entirely preventable if human expertise had been available. General Korthvan prepared for what might be the final battle of galactic civilization as hegemony forces approached the core worlds. His defeated fleets had no hope of victory against an enemy that had systematically dismantled every defensive strategy the aliens could devise. High Counselor Marndust reviewed classified reports showing the true scope of the catastrophe facing the galaxy. Conservative estimates suggested that over half of all inhabited worlds had been lost to warfare, economic collapse, or refugee displacement. Several entire species had gone extinct, and many others were on the verge of disappearing forever. The decision to exile humanity had been intended to strengthen galactic civilization by removing an unpredictable element. Instead, it had triggered the complete destruction of everything the galaxy had built over thousands of years. In the depths of space, the mechanical hegemony continued its relentless advance toward the heart of galactic civilization. The artificial intelligences had waited patiently for the humans to leave before beginning their conquest, because they recognized what the aliens had failed to understand. Humans had been the only species capable of the adaptive thinking and creative problem-solving needed to defeat a truly alien enemy. Without human leadership, the galaxy was defenseless against any threat that could not be countered by conventional methods. Captain Zethkar of the Altarian Defense Force stared at the red warning lights flashing across his command console. 5 years had passed since the humans left the galaxy, and now his military coordination systems were failing in ways that made no sense. The sophisticated battle management software that had controlled fleet operations for decades was breaking down piece by piece. Zethkar had been a young officer when humans first shared their military coordination technology with the Galactic Defense Alliance. The human systems had been far superior to anything the aliens possessed, because they could adapt to changing battle conditions in real time. Human programmers had continued improving the software year after year, making it more efficient and reliable. But the humans were gone now, and no one else understood how their systems actually worked. The alien technicians could perform basic maintenance and follow simple repair procedures, but they could not solve complex problems or create new updates. Every week brought new failures and glitches that no one knew how to fix. The Corvin Trading Consortium was facing similar problems according to reports that reached Zethkar through official channels. Trademaster Velnoth had sent desperate messages to the Galactic Council explaining that shipping efficiency had dropped by 40% since the human departure. The elegant logistics algorithms that humans had developed over centuries were failing without constant human oversight. Velnoth described how human traders had possessed an almost magical ability to predict market demands and optimize cargo routes across vast distances. They had created trading relationships between species that had never cooperated before, and somehow made the complex arrangements profitable for everyone involved. Without human coordination, the old trade routes were falling apart. Ships arrived at destinations to find no buyers for their cargo. Essential supplies failed to reach colonies that depended on regular deliveries. The carefully balanced economic networks that had sustained galactic civilization for generations were collapsing into chaos on the research world of Proxima Labs. Dr. Kethalara of the Centaurian Institute watched her most promising medical research grind to a halt. She had been working on quantum cellular regeneration techniques that could extend lifespans for all galactic species. The project had been moving forward rapidly until the humans left. The breakthrough treatments relied on innovative problem-solving methods that humans had developed through decades of trial and error. Human researchers had possessed a unique talent for asking questions that other species considered impossible or illogical. They would suggest experimental approaches that seemed crazy until they actually worked. Dr. Kethalara tried to continue the research using traditional Centaurian methods, but progress slowed to almost nothing. Her team could refine existing procedures and make small improvements, but they could not generate the revolutionary insights that led to major breakthroughs. Scientific advancement across the galaxy had essentially stopped. The Galactic Council held emergency sessions almost every week as reports of system failures poured in from across known space. High Counselor Marndest of the Vegan Empire found himself dealing with crisis after crisis that his government had no idea how to solve. Council records showed that humans had been involved in nearly every aspect of galactic civilization. They had designed communication networks that allowed instant messaging between distant star systems. They had created environmental management systems that kept thousands of different worlds habitable for their native species. They had developed cultural exchange programs that promoted understanding between alien societies. Most importantly, humans had served as mediators and problem solvers when conflicts arose between different species. Their ability to understand multiple perspectives and find creative compromises had prevented countless wars over the past several centuries. The Treaty of Andromeda, which had maintained peace between the Rigelian and Centaurian empires for 200 years, was beginning to show serious strain. Border disputes that human diplomats had settled quickly in the past were now escalating into military confrontations. Both empires blamed each other for violating treaty terms and demanded action from the Galactic Council. Counselor Marndest realized that his government lacked the diplomatic skills needed to resolve the growing tensions. Vegan negotiators were excellent at creating detailed legal agreements, but they struggled with the flexible thinking required to address unexpected situations. Humans had possessed an intuitive understanding of alien psychology that allowed them to predict problems before they became serious. Similar conflicts were emerging throughout the galaxy as old grievances resurfaced without human mediation. Andromedan Federation withdrew from several trade agreements claiming that other species were taking advantage of their generosity. The Silicon Collective accused biological species of discrimination and threatened to cut off technological support. Each crisis required immediate attention, but the Galactic Council seemed incapable of decisive action. The alien species had become dependent on human leadership and innovation without realizing it. They had assumed that galactic civilization would continue functioning normally after the humans left, but they had been terribly wrong. Captain Zethkar received new orders to deploy his fleet to the Rigelian border where tensions were escalating rapidly. His damaged coordination systems would make fleet operations extremely difficult, but he had no choice except to follow orders and hope for the best. The irony was not lost on him that humans had been accused of being too unpredictable and dangerous to participate in galactic government. In reality, they had been the most stabilizing force in known space. Their creativity and adaptability had allowed galactic civilization to grow and prosper in ways that would have been impossible. Otherwise, Trademaster Velnoth published a detailed report showing how human trading networks had connected every inhabited world in the galaxy. The economic models that humans had designed took into account hundreds of different species' needs, cultures, and resources. The mathematical complexity of their systems was staggering and completely beyond the ability of other species to replicate. Dr. Kethalara submitted her own research findings to the Council, demonstrating that scientific progress had essentially stopped across all fields of study. While other species excelled at refining and perfecting existing technologies, only humans had consistently generated the revolutionary breakthroughs that pushed knowledge forward. The evidence was overwhelming, but many council members still refused to admit their mistake. They argued that the current problems were temporary adjustments that would resolve themselves once alien species adapted to managing their own affairs. High Counselor Marndest was not convinced by these optimistic predictions. He had access to classified reports showing the true extent of the crisis facing galactic civilization. Economic networks were collapsing faster than they could be repaired. Military coordination was breaking down just when tensions between species were reaching dangerous levels. Scientific research had stagnated at the worst possible time when new technologies were desperately needed. Some council members had begun suggesting that contact should be established with the humans to request their return. These proposals were immediately rejected by the majority, who insisted that admitting error would undermine the authority of galactic government. Meanwhile, the Sol system remained completely sealed behind energy barriers that no alien technology could penetrate. Human space had become invisible and unreachable, as if it had simply vanished from the universe. No signals could get through the barriers, and no ships could approach without being turned away by unknown forces. Captain Zethkar wondered what the humans were doing during their isolation. Were they watching the galaxy fall apart and feeling satisfied with their revenge, or Were they working on solutions that might someday help repair the damage? 5 years seemed like a short time, but the consequences of losing human participation were already catastrophic. Zethkar feared that the worst was yet to come as the full impact of human withdrawal continued spreading across the galaxy. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the colony ship New Horizon and watched the stars through the main viewing screen. His hands shook slightly as he held the message pad that had arrived just hours ago. The words on the screen seemed impossible to believe, but there they were in official Galactic Council format with all the right codes and signatures. All human ship stations and colonies were ordered to return to Earth immediately. No exceptions would be made, and no delays would be accepted. Every human in the galaxy had exactly 6 months to pack up their lives and come home. After that, the borders of human space would be sealed forever. Jake had been born on Kepler 7 in a human colony that had thrived for over a century. His parents had been farmers who grew food that fed 3 different alien species. His sister ran a school that taught both human and alien children. His brother worked as an engineer on the massive space elevators that moved cargo between the planet's surface and the orbital stations. None of that mattered now. The message came from Lisa Carter, who served as Earth's representative to the Galactic Council. Jake remembered her from the news broadcasts where she always spoke with calm authority about human achievements and cooperation with alien species. Her final message to all human settlements had been different, though. Her voice carried sadness and anger that she could not hide. The Galactic Council had voted to strip humans of all voting rights and classify them as a developing species that needed constant supervision. The vote had been unanimous among the alien species. Every single one of them had agreed that humans were too dangerous and unpredictable to be treated as equals in galactic society. Jake thought about the Kepler incident that had started everything. A human research team had discovered a new type of energy source that could power entire star systems. Instead of keeping it secret, the humans had immediately shared the discovery with all species in the galaxy. The Alien Council members had been suspicious of human motives and accused them of trying to gain political advantage through fake generosity. When the energy source proved to be real and incredibly valuable, the accusations grew worse. Some alien species claimed humans were hiding other discoveries. Others said humans were planning to use their technological gifts as weapons. The fear and paranoia spread until the Council decided that humans could not be trusted with independence. Captain Ben Rodriguez walked onto the bridge and stood beside Jake. Ben commanded the deep space research vessel Discovery, which had been exploring the Outer Rim territories for the past 5 years. His ship was packed with scientific equipment, and his crew included some of the best human researchers in the galaxy. Ben looked tired and older than his 40 years. The past few months had been hard on everyone as they prepared for the withdrawal. His voice was quiet when he spoke to Jake about the long journey home. The Discovery had been visiting human settlements and research stations to help with the evacuation. Ben told Jake about the abandoned colonies they had passed on their way to Rendeos with the New Horizon. Places where humans had lived and worked for generations were now empty. The alien species that had benefited from human presence seemed surprised and confused by the sudden departure. On Rigel 4, the humans had been running the planetary defense grid that protected both human and alien populations from space pirates. When the human technicians left, the aliens discovered they did not know how to operate the complex systems. The defense grid failed within days, and pirate attacks resumed. The trading post at Centauri Station had been managed by humans for over 2 centuries. Human traders had built relationships with dozens of alien species and created supply chains that moved goods across thousands of light years. Without human coordination, the trading networks began falling apart almost immediately. Jake remembered his last conversation with Dr. Amy Foster, who worked as Earth's leading expert on alien biology and culture. She had spent 30 years studying different species and helping them solve problems that seemed impossible. Her research had led to medical breakthroughs that saved millions of alien lives. Dr. Foster had been scheduled to give a speech at the Galaxy Science Convention when the withdrawal order came. Instead, she used her speaking time to deliver a farewell message that was broadcast across the entire galaxy. Her words had been simple but powerful. She told the assembled alien representatives that humans had come to the galaxy in peace and friendship. They had shared their knowledge freely and asked for nothing except to be treated as equals. Since the galactic community had decided humans were unworthy of equal treatment, they would respect that decision and leave. The message had ended with Dr. Foster saying goodbye to all the alien friends and colleagues she had worked with over the decades. She thanked them for the opportunities to learn and grow together, but said that humans would not stay where they were not wanted. Jake had watched the broadcast with tears in his eyes. Dr. Foster had been like a grandmother to many young humans who dreamed of exploring the galaxy and making friends with alien species. Her dignified farewell had made the pain of leaving even stronger. The worst part for Jake was knowing how much the galaxy would lose when humans left. Human settlements had become centers of innovation and cooperation, where different species worked together on projects that none could accomplish alone. Human diplomats had prevented countless wars by finding creative solutions to conflicts that seemed hopeless. Human engineers had designed the transportation systems that connected distant worlds. Human doctors had developed treatments for diseases that affected multiple species. Human teachers had created educational programs that helped young aliens learn about the wider galaxy. Now all of that would be gone. The aliens had made their choice and humans would honor it, even though the cost would be enormous for everyone involved. Captain Rodriguez received a communication from Earth Command, informing him that the final phase of the withdrawal was beginning. All human ships were to form a convoy for the journey home. The Sol system's new defense barriers were almost complete and would be activated as soon as the last human ship passed through. Jake looked around the bridge at his crew members who were preparing for departure. These were good people who had dedicated their lives to exploring space and building friendships with alien species. They deserved better than to be treated like dangerous children who could not be trusted. But humans had learned long ago that respect could not be demanded or forced. It had to be earned through actions and given freely by choice. If the galaxy did not want to give humans that respect, then humans would find their own path forward. The New Horizons engines came online, and the ship began moving toward the rally point where other human vessels waited. Jake took one last look at the alien worlds visible in the distance, then turned his attention to the navigation charts that would guide them home. Behind them, the galaxy continued turning as it always had, but something fundamental had changed. For the first time in centuries, there would be no human voices in the Galactic Council chambers, no human ships exploring unknown regions of space, no human settlements welcoming alien visitors with food and friendship. The universe was about to discover what it had lost.